welcome to my 517 Fellow Friday series. Today, I am talking with Jay Harker. Jay is a fellow trust lawyer and the senior vice president of the Stifel Trust Company. Jay's joining me from St. Louis, Missouri this morning. Thank you so much for chatting with me today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Well, I often have clients who I meet with during the estate planning process, and they don't know who to pick as a trustee. They either don't have children, don't have close family members, don't have a trusted friend, or maybe they have those people and they're just not the right fit to be a trustee. And we often get into those conversations about, what are the options? Who's out there that can provide this service? And I know that Stifel offers that service. That's what the trust company is for. So I wanted to chat with you today and just learn a little bit more about that. Can you just start out with a brief overview of what Stifel Trust Company is and what those services are?
Sure will. Stifel, with a capital S, if you will, is a nationwide financial services firm. Its biggest affiliate, its biggest subsidiary is Stifel Nicholas, which is a broker dealer and has offices in all across the country. I think we're in almost 50 states, maybe 48 or 46 states, about 2,000 and some odd financial advisors. And that sort of is the main business that Stifel is in, although there's investment banking, there's providing investment research and so on and so forth. So it's maybe the seventh largest, I think, in terms of advisors, broker dealer in the nation. Stifel Trust Company is a wholly owned subsidiary of Stifel, and our job is to provide professional trust services, administering wills and trusts and so on and so forth for the clients of all of those Stifel advisors who may need the services of a professional trustee.
Okay, thank you. Now, what exactly is a professional trustee going to do when they're doing that administrative process?
Excellent. So trustees are in charge of trusts. If a client has a trust that is created in their will, or if a client has a revocable living trust and they pass away or they become incapacitated, or they provide that after their death, there's going to be a trust left behind for spouse, kids, grandkids, nieces, nephews, what have you. Somebody has to be the trustee of that trust. The trustee's job is to run the trust, to drive that bus. And I like to think of the trustee's duties as falling into three buckets. There are the day-to-day administrative duties. You have to keep records, you have to produce statements, you have to answer questions, you have to produce tax returns, and all of that kind of paperwork, all of that day-to-day administrative burden. If the trust owns a house, are the taxes being paid? If the trust is buying or selling a house, as anybody knows who has ever bought or sold a house, there's a ton of paperwork that has to be done, right? And someone has to do that. The trustee of the trust does that for any property that's owned by the trust, houses, investment accounts, or anything else. The second bucket of a trustee's duty is investing. So when a trustee, and it doesn't matter if it's a bank or trust company or a family member or whoever it is, the trustee is responsible for prudently safekeeping, securing, and investing the property that's in the trust, so that that property is used for the benefit and the well-being of all the beneficiaries of the trust, current and future. And then finally, and this can often be maybe the most challenging depending upon the situation for the particular trust, is the trustee is also in charge of making distributions for the trust. So if mom and dad create this trust and they pass away, and the trust continues on to help support Junior after the parents have passed away, Junior is going to need money from that trust. That's the whole point of having the trust. You will have drafted into that trust, you and your clients will have drafted into that trust language to give the trustee instructions that you can make a distribution for this purpose or that purpose, but not for this purpose or that purpose. And it's the trustee's job then to carry that out.
Okay. When I look at it from that perspective with the three buckets, it really does highlight some skills and maybe even some experience and knowledge that a trustee might need to be able to accomplish those tasks. Can you explain what the benefits would be of having a corporate trustee handle those responsibilities?
Sure. Different individual family members, as you've alluded to, may have different um, skills and capabilities for doing those certain kinds of tasks that I just talked about. Some family members maybe are good with financial assets and managing money. Others may not be so. Same thing with corporate trustees. And so I think in terms of the benefits of a corporate trustee is if somebody is contemplating using a corporate trustee, I think you have to look at what does the corporate trustee bring to the table that maybe a family member doesn't. And I think of the following four things. A corporate trustee is independent. It's not a family member. It's not tied up in the family dynamics and everything that's gone on before. It's a independent, dispassionate third party. And so, what's the advantage to that? Sometimes it may not be wise. If money is going to be set aside for a certain family member to be held in trust because, for example, they're challenged when it comes to dealing with money and financial assets. It's difficult sometimes, given the family circumstances, to put one family member in charge of another family member's trust because of all the family dynamics and the history, and there could be jealousies and there could be resentments and all of that. A lot of that disappears if you have an independent third party being the trustee. We don't have a dog in that fight, so to speak. We're solely committed to doing what's in the best interest of the beneficiary, and it doesn't matter that we had it's not somebody that the beneficiary would have had an argument with at Christmas 2 years ago, that kind of a thing. So independence, I think, is what we bring to the table. We also bring knowledge and experience. Managing trust accounts is what we do for a living. My colleagues and I come in here, 5 days a week, and that's what we do. And so we know how to do it. We know what the laws are. We know what the regulations are. We know what you can and can't do. We know what certain terms of art may mean when you read health maintenance, education, and support in a trust document as a standard for distributing money. What does that mean? It means something different to a professional trustee, maybe than to somebody who's not experienced. So what could go wrong. I'm familiar with a case. You'll appreciate this, where an individual was made trustee, and this was a charitable remainder trust, which, for the benefit of your listeners, has very specific rules that govern the distributing of money from that trust. The trustee, who is an individual, not a trust company, was not aware of those rules and distributed money that wasn't necessarily, in the eyes of the IRS, the proper way to do it. And at the end of the day, when that got audited after the death of the grantor, there was thousands and thousands of dollars of penalties and back taxes and canceled exemptions and all that kind of stuff that the IRS took away. So knowledge and experience can be important. Trustees are accountable because we're a bank, and most trust companies are banks, either a full service bank or a limited purpose bank. We have bank examiners that come in and look over our shoulder all the time. If a local trust company is a Michigan chartered bank, they have examiners who come in from the Michigan Department of Finance or whoever supervises banks. We're a national bank, so we have national bank examiners who come in. Nobody is looking over the shoulders of an individual family member who's serving as trustee. So if they steer the ship off course and they do things that aren't quite according to Hoyle, there's nobody there to correct them unless a family member gets angry enough to file suit. And that's a pretty big step for somebody to take. Finally, we are immortal. And I don't mean that we're superheroes. All I mean is that if I'm not here, someone else is here to take my place. And sometimes if you appoint a family member to be trustee, sometimes clients will appoint their sibling, their brother or sister, to step in and be a trustee. Well, heck, my experience has been that by the time the creator of the trust is old enough that they need a successor trustee to step in, their siblings are the same age that they are, and they don't want to do it either. So the corporate trustee is always going to be there. We're not going to get tired. We're not going to go on vacation. We're not going to get sick. We're not going to decide we don't want to do, that job anymore. And so the independence, the knowledge and experience, the accountability, and the immortality, the always being able to be there when needed, those I think are what the corporate trustee brings to the table.
I want to touch a little bit on that knowledge and experience part a little, just a bit more. In Michigan, we have certain rules about how a trustee has to handle administration and different statutes that talk about what has to be done at what time in the process. And I'm just curious. So you guys are in St. Louis, Missouri, but you've got locations all over the country. Uh, are there any issues that you run into in addressing the legal side of administration, or do you guys have the ability to offer those services in every state because you have that ability to know the law around the country?
Sure, and I'll answer that kind of in two parts. We certainly because we're a national bank, we certainly can service clients anywhere. We're not limited to one state or contiguous states or anything like that. We can serve, and we do. I think we currently have clients in, I don't know, 44, 45, 46 states. And even though headquartered here in Missouri, I'll tell you, we have more trust clients in the state of California than we do in Missouri. I don't know why exactly that happens, but it does. And so we do run sort of a national practice that way. We support that. We keep an extensive library, if you will, not hard copy book library, but on our computers of the state trust laws in all 50 states. And we, as I say, because we deal with people in 40 some odd states, we're familiar with how those go. Some more frequently than others, of course, as you would expect. Florida, as I said, California, New York, and some of the others that we're very familiar with, and Missouri, of course, because that's where we're located. But we do keep up with that. The other thing that I will say, Katrina, is that let's say for a specialized area like supplemental needs trusts, where the rules could certainly vary from state to state. The bureaucracy certainly does, and the state agencies have their own peculiar rules from state to state to state. Florida has different expectations from supplemental needs trust trustees than California does, or than New Jersey or New York does. And so we will not hesitate to hire local counsel, such as
Right.
yourself, who will be more familiar than we are about some of the nooks and crannies when we feel like we need some help with somebody more familiar with local law, for sure.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that can often be an overlooked area of trust administration. There are many times where I get involved really late in the game because somebody tried to run the show themselves and didn't understand the notice requirements or how to communicate with
Right.
the beneficiaries. And often that is what leads to litigation. And so I think that that is a really important thing that a corporate trustee does bring to the table because it can eliminate future litigation and unnecessary cost and conflict. And again, I think that that can be often overlooked, that there are rules about how this runs.
I think you're so right about that. One of the more common ones that I see, as you know, in state laws, always have rules about, as you mentioned, informing beneficiaries, which might include future beneficiaries, that maybe giving them an opportunity. Hey, listen, if you want to read the trust, you're entitled to, and if you want to see an annual accounting, you're entitled to. I think that individual family member trustees oftentimes don't do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's out of any ill intention. I think often they just don't know that they're supposed to. And as you know, because you see the same publications that I do, it does lead to litigation when somebody gets mad and they'll say, so and so has never shared with me a copy of the trust. I don't know what's going on in the trust. I've never seen a statement. And it is a way that a individual trustee can trip themselves up and get themselves in trouble.
Yeah. really great benefits, obviously, of having a corporate trustee. But I think that often what clients will say to me, or even just other, people in the community will say, it sounds great, but I don't have very much money. I don't have a lot of assets. Maybe they expect that they have to have a lot of liquidity or investments versus, a client who has a lot of real estate and maybe their estate is made up of primarily that. So is there any type of a threshold that people need to meet with their assets before it is um, advisable or prudent or beneficial to have a corporate trustee?
Let me answer that in two ways as well. Is there
Okay.
any sort of limit for people to have a trust?
No,
And
not in my practice.
no, and I don't think so either. I think it's more about what is it that you're trying to accomplish,
Right.
and is that goal best accomplished or more efficiently accomplished if you have a trust?
Mhm.
So I would say not. And then the question then is, if you do have a trust, is there some kind of should it involve X number of dollars before you consider a corporate trustee? Corporate trustees certainly charge fees. That's the business that we're in. Um, but I still would not draw a hard line in the sand. I would say, yeah, we have fees, and there's going to be some kind of minimum fee, and so maybe that means that the trust should be $500,000, or maybe it should be X, just so that it's worthwhile for the trust to pay the fee to have the corporate trustee involved. But I would say the question, do I need a corporate trustee, is more tied back to those four things that I mentioned as being what the corporate trustee brings to the table. If you need an independent trustee to keep peace in the family, then you might look at a corporate trustee. If you don't need that, if you're using the trust mainly as a probate avoidance device, and some of those other things don't matter in terms of settling that estate, they're going to get help from you. They're going to get help from their tax advisor and their financial advisor. Maybe they don't need a corporate trustee.
Okay. While we're on the subject of, that cost, you mentioned that obviously this is the business that you're in, and just like I'm in the business of making money and making a living and providing those documents. Um, how would you explain how that cost works for the trust and for the family?
Okay. Very fair questions. The trustees, for the most part, charge fees in the same way that your clients probably pay for, say, investment advice, where there's often a tiered fee schedule. If your account is worth between this and this, the fee is going to be X, and if it's worth this and this, the fee is going to be Y. And trust companies often use tiered fee schedules as well, so that the larger the account, the less is the fee expressed as a percentage.
Okay.
It may be 1% for a fee for a trust of, I don't know, say $1 million. It may be 0.5% when the trust is $5 million. I don't know. And so that's the way the fees get charged. I think there is the feeling sort of generally that people say, oh my, well, corporate trustees are very expensive, and so I better be sure that I really need one before I engage one. And we certainly do charge a fee, as you say. That's how I earn my living, and my colleagues here at the trust company. So we are in business to make a profit. Stifel, again with the big S, appreciates it if we add to the bottom line, and that's what we're here to do. But I think that when you look into it, the cost of having a corporate trustee is not all that much more, and sometimes less, than when you have a family member trustee. And the reason why I say that is because there are a lot of things bundled into our fee that an individual trustee would have to go out on the open market and buy. So, for example, one of those buckets that I talked about, the things that trustees do, is invest the money that's in the trust. That's
Mhm.
included in our fee. You're paying for the management of those investments in addition to the trust administration. An individual family member is going to have to go buy those investment services from
Mhm.
somebody who provides that. The same thing for legal services. If they need help, by gosh, I hope they come and see you and ask you before they do something rash and get themselves in trouble. We have in-house legal counsel, so that My legal counsel is 2 doors down from me as I sit here and speak. So if I have a question about can we do this or can we do that, I've got that in house. I don't have to pay extra for it. So when you add all those sorts of things up, the counting of services, the tax services, and so forth, the costs are pretty close in
Yeah.
most cases. Yeah.
That's a really great way to look at it. And honestly, I had never looked at it that way before, breaking it down. But if you have a lay person as a trustee, you're a child, a sibling, like you mentioned, they are entitled to compensation. And just to throw it out there, in our area in Michigan, reasonable compensation is about $25 to $50 an hour for a trustee to provide services. And if they then have to go out and find a lawyer to help with things, you're going to have legal fees. They've got to work with a tax professional. Maybe they've got to bring in that
Right.
financial advisor. You're just going to keep compounding that. And then the other thing I think about, and it just kind of came to the forefront of my mind as you were talking, they don't have the knowledge and experience that a professional trustee has. It might take them 3 times as long to do something that how to do already. And so it just goes kind of haywire from there. I think it's a really great way of explaining how those fees can be similar, if not cheaper sometimes, to have a corporate trustee in the mix. So we talked about this a little bit already, but is there anything else that you want to share about times where it might make more sense to um, have an individual versus a corporate trustee, and maybe the other way around? Is there anything you want to share about why it would make more sense to have an individual versus a corporate trustee?
Sure. I think there are cases. I think you would probably see the same thing that I do out here in the world, out here in the marketplace, is that most trustees are individual trustees, individual family member trustees. And I think that's okay. And I think that in very many cases, that's probably a good choice. I think, as I mentioned earlier, if the trust is mainly a probate avoidance device, then you don't need all the machinery that we bring to the table. Your
Right.
mom and dad pass away, they're going to engage some help from you and from the accountant and from the financial advisor, and they're going to settle the estate and then distribute the money and be done with it. And I think that works out really well. If you have a trust where the main asset is a family business and the idea is to continue that business, not to liquidate it and reinvest it, but to continue it. And if the family members slash beneficiaries are involved in running that business, probably makes sense for them to continue to run that trust without the interference from a corporate trustee. I would want to, I would look at it from the point of view of, gee, can we liquidate this and better diversify the portfolio so that if the real estate market goes to heck, the trust isn't in trouble. The family doesn't look at it that way. This is their source of business. Family farms, I think, are often that way. Maybe they've
Oh,
been in the family for 2, 3 generations,
mhm,
and there's a real attachment to that ground. And in those kinds of cases, I think family members make a lot of sense. On the
mhm,
other side of the coin, if you think about some of those attributes of corporate trustees that I mentioned earlier, those are the situations where a corporate trustee makes sense. If Johnny's money is going to stay in trust, don't put Susie in charge of that trust. You're going to ruin Susie's life. I'm
right.
just telling you, I see it
Yeah.
all the time. I've seen this for
Mhm,
40 some odd years happen. If you have a specialty trust, like a charitable remainder trust or a supplemental needs trust that has very special rules that you have to follow, otherwise you could really mess it up, use an experienced corporate trustee.
yeah.
Don't put it in the hands of somebody just because they got good grades in school. They're not going to know what the rules are, and they're going to mess it up, which could be more costly in the long run. I was reading an estate planning book the other day where the author opined that in many cases, not only are the costs very similar to using an individual trustee and a corporate trustee, but depending upon the circumstances, it can end up costing you more to use the family member if things get all bollocksed up and have to get unwound. So, you think of blended families, where if you looked
Mhm,
at what family member would we choose? Is it going to be one of his or one of hers, so to speak?
Yeah.
There can be some blended families where they were blended when everybody was very young and they worked very smoothly, but families that where there may be a second spouse that came later in life can be difficult situations in
Yeah.
terms of the family dynamics. And then maybe you want to have an independent trustee. So
Right.
that's what I would say
Okay.
in terms of when would I recommend the one as opposed to the other.
Okay. The blended family is interesting. I do work with quite a few blended families, and that can often be a hot topic. Whose child are we going to pick? And often they want to pick one of each and make them work together. And whew, that's
I've
that's not
I've
always the greatest
I've
idea
seen that
either.
on I've seen that unravel too, where
Yeah.
there, unbeknownst to mom and dad, there were feelings between the two family members. There's resentment, or there's what have you. And I've seen situations where the two couldn't work together, and they
Right.
came to loggerheads, and that ended up in court. So yeah.
Yeah. Now, one thing we haven't really talked about, and I realize that we are not in a world where mm, as many people are dealing with federal estate taxes as they were maybe a decade ago. But I still have some clients that I work with where we have that talk about, are we going to have a taxable estate at some point? And so, is there anything you can share about the benefits of having a corporate trustee involved if we do have to worry about there being a federal taxable estate and dealing with maybe separating assets and filing those special returns?
I would say yes and no. I would say if the only reason for splitting the assets or having the trust or doing what you're doing is as tax planning advice, and there aren't any of the attendant family issues involved, junior's a special needs beneficiary or so and so, it becomes less crucial to have a corporate trustee. On the other hand, at least given today's exemptions, now we don't know what'll happen, at the end of 2025,
Right,
but they tend to be very large estates. And
right,
so that may be, if you're, looking at a state that's going to be a $20 million state, a $25 million estate, that's a lot of responsibility to put on an individual's
yeah,
shoulders. Co-trustees might not be a bad idea. We're certainly amenable to working as a co-trustee, and that way you've got the family member involved and you've got the family voice.
right,
But on the other hand, you have some checks and balances because you've got a corporate trustee. The other thing I would say is if it's a specialty kind of trust, like a spousal lifetime access trust, where people are funding it with what they believe is their own money, not understanding that this is an irrevocable trust. When I put my money in there, oh, guess it's not my money anymore. But it's sometimes hard, I think, for a client to grasp that in a way that maybe
yeah,
is what the IRS is intending.
mhm,
And so you can get family members that might run amok and kind of undo the planning because they can't discontinue sort of using that as their
right,
pocketbook and not distributing according to the standards of the trust.
yeah. Okay, thank you. The last thing I wanted to ask you about was just kind of logistics. You know, a lot of administration is kind of boots on the ground. We got to go to the house and clean it out, and we got to work with a realtor and an appraiser and sell and go to the local credit union. And those are things where, clients think, well, I need somebody here. And so logistically, how does that work if they choose to use Stifel Trust Company? Who's doing the work? How does that happen?
Yeah, no, that's a real good question. I have seen, just because I've been in the business so long, I've seen a sea change in the way trust services are delivered. So when I started in this business as a young pup, it was still kind of the wood paneled office, and most of your clients were sort of local or regional around you, and they would come into the office and sit down across the big imposing desk, and they would talk about their trust and what they needed to do. And that's just not our world anymore. That was the
Yeah,
world before internet, before cell phones, before text messaging, before all of that. And now so much of what we do is done like you and I are doing right now.
yep,
We're on a Zoom meeting, which didn't exist in times past. And so things are done so much electronically now, Zoom meetings and automatic transfers from one account to the next, and you can pay bills that way too. If a beneficiary needs a car and they live in California, I can pay that car dealer for that car electronically and have them paid the next day. So there's that to take into account. The other thing is, there's a local presence, because if I need to get the locks changed on the house, I'm not sending somebody from St. Louis to do that.
Right.
I'm calling you, or I'm calling somebody in our local Stifel office that's right there and saying, listen, I need a locksmith. Who can I call to change the locks? If I need, same thing, if we need to have an estate sale, I can call you. I can call the local Stifel office and find out who I need to talk to do that. Certainly at some point, somebody from here usually comes out, we'll take an inventory and we'll make sure everything is secure. But then there's so much that you can do by remote control after that: real estate agents, as I said, auction services, what have you, that the face to face isn't quite as crucial as it used to be, for sure. And our service model is unique in that when there is a local Stifel Nicholas financial advisor who is involved, that person takes on the role as sort of the relationship manager, the facilitator of communication
Mhm.
between St. Louis and the local beneficiaries and clients, the ability to know people in the community and where can we go and who can we hire and all that kind of thing. So I think that enhances our ability. As I said, I think Stifel has 300 some odd offices across the country, and so we leverage that in order to help us deliver those services in all those locations.
Okay. Now, would that local Stifel, as you said, relationship manager, is that the person that's going to deal with family conflict? If something comes up with the beneficiaries, whether it's a conflict between them or conflict between the beneficiaries and Stifel in Missouri, is that who's going to deal with that? Are they going to be the conflict manager?
Well, often they're the communication manager, and as you know, sometimes situations can be diffused if you have efficient communication. Sometimes I think conflicts are caused by people not feeling like they're being communicated with, and so to that extent, I think it does. To some extent, I think it gets diffused uh, just by having a corporate trustee, as opposed to having family members arguing with each other. But that doesn't solve all situations, for sure. And then again, as I say, if it comes down to it and we need local legal help, not in terms of settling the estate or as an estate plan, but you need to hire a litigation attorney someplace, then that's probably going to be somebody local as well that's going
Right.
to help us deal with
Just not me.
that.
Okay. Is there anything else that you'd like to share today? This has been very, very informational.
No, I appreciate the opportunity to chat a little bit. It's been informative for me too. We like to meet the people around the country that are interacting with the Stifel clients and helping them achieve their goals and do their estate planning. And by all means, for any of your clients, if maybe in the needs of the services of a professional trustee, that's our business.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for joining me. If anybody watching is in the market for a corporate trustee, or maybe they just want to learn more about it, I would strongly encourage you to reach out to a local Stifel office. You can also reach out to me and I can put you in contact with the right people. And if you're interested in being featured on my Follow Friday series, you can send me an email at Katrina at cornerstonelegalplc.com. Thanks for watching.